I think we're a much bigger threat to YouTube, to Google, to other big tech companies than we are to the United States government.
Welcome everyone to Unsafe Space. I'm your host, Carter Laren. Please, if you enjoy our content, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe. If you want to support us, you can go to unsafespace.com and donate or buy merch or all that kind of stuff. And if you go to unsafespace.com, you will notice that our videos on that site are not hosted by YouTube. They're hosted by LBRY. And some of you may not even know what LBRY is. And I think it's time you understood what LBRY is and how they are embroiled in a pretty monumentally important lawsuit with the SEC right now. So I am pleased to bring Jeremy Kauffman to the show. Jeremy is the founder of LBRY. He created LBRY because he fell in love with the idea of a shared global content network that is owned and controlled by no one. LBRY is now used by more than 20 million people each month. You can follow LBRY on Odysee, odysee.com/@LBRY. We'll put that link below. And you can go to help.LBRYSaveCrypto.com. We'll put that link below, and that link will tell you more about the SEC lawsuit. Anyway, Jeremy, thank you for joining. Welcome to Unsafe Space.
It's great to be here with you. I'm a big fan of your show, Carter.
I was not. When I first heard that you liked us at all, I didn't believe it. And I think it was someone on your team was like, no, like Jeremy likes you guys. And I was thinking, there's not any tech CEO in the world who likes us. That's not possible. So you're the unicorn. It's great to meet you.
I think it's crazy that there's not more. You know, if there's a field that you want to be, meritocratic, it's the tech industry. I actually suspect more people are fans and they are just afraid to say it is at least my hope of what's going on.
That's possible. I definitely do have people message me sometime, both from the cannabis industry and from the tech industry who say things like, I'm watching your show and I really like it, but don't tell anyone. It's like, all right, well, thanks.
But from my perspective, there's a lot of benefit to being on this side. I think it's the side that will ultimately win because I think, it's the side of truth is my opinion. So.
Yeah, I agree. Why don't we start by just giving people an overview of what LBRY is?
So LBRY is an open source blockchain-based publishing protocol. We like to say that it does to content publishing what Bitcoin does to money. And we can get into exactly what that means, but basically it allows YouTube-like or Amazon-like services to exist without that company controlling the whole thing. So we can have the user experience that we like without having to deal with the terrible policy and without being beholden to some of these corporations that we might not like the policies of. And the easiest way to use LBRY is a website called Odysee, ODYSEE.com. It was used by more than 20 million people last month. And if you go on there, you'll find all kinds of great content creators and all kinds of great content, some from the really big names to smaller up and coming channels that are creating some really interesting stuff. So I would encourage everyone, if someone's watching this on YouTube, they can pop over to odysee.com /@unsafe, pick up the video and be watching that video in a space that's much friendlier, less exploitative, and a number of other benefits.
Susan can't control anything over at LBRY.
She has no power here.
Well, so actually, let me ask about power for a moment, and I clarify, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is, theoretically, if you went crazy, you could modify the Odysee interface to muck with what you're showing, but you can't actually change. Like anyone else could write an interface to just read what's on the LBRY blockchain, and you can't stop them really from presenting videos. So you don't. Do you have the ability to suppress videos you don't like?
So on Odysee we do, but on LBRY we do not. And so that's exactly like you said, because everything we've done is open source and decentralized. Anyone can create an app. Anyone can fork our code. And so in the event that a brainworm got me and I become an evil person who wants to enforce my values across the whole network and censor content that I disagree with, it would be very easy. You're not trapped. There's that sort of lock-in. I tend to think they're not monopolies, but they're monopoly-like in terms of the amount of power that they have over you because there's such large network effects. Those kinds of things aren't possible. It's just simply not possible. And a lot of our sort of competitive advantage from a business perspective is actually that we've handcuffed ourselves. So we've kind of said, you can really trust us because we've made these things impossible in a way that it wasn't even possible to make them impossible before we invented some of these things.
Right. Well, I mean, and fundamentally, we don't have to trust you.
Exactly.
That's the thing. It doesn't matter. You can become Susan and it doesn't really matter.
Yes.
So, okay. I want to get a little bit technical. I don't think we should get in like too deep, but people hear the word crypto and I think most people just think of Bitcoin right away. Laymen are just, okay, Bitcoin, it's some kind of money thing. Maybe some people own a few Bitcoin. But there's a difference between utility tokens and something like Bitcoin and maybe just you could outline what that difference is and what LBRY is using a crypto for. What is LBRY using it for?
Yeah, although I do want to emphasize one more time, Odysee.com, super easy. You don't need to understand any of this. A lot of people use Odysee and they don't even realize they're interacting with a blockchain or that they're interacting with a cryptocurrency. But in my opinion, blockchain technology can be used to do all kinds of things. I actually think of blockchain as the fact that blockchain has this money-like aspects. I actually think of that as secondary. To me, a blockchain in the way that I came at creating this company, it's secondary. It's very important and it's necessary, but it's first and foremost a new type of database. It's a new type of agreeing on a sort of state of affairs, on a state of data. And we can now do this without needing to trust any one party. And so you can build all kinds of interesting systems, from decentralized autonomous organizations to decentralized applications like we've built with LBRY. And so what the LBRY blockchain does is it acts as a content register. It acts as this listing of information that exists, who published it, details about it. It allows the creators to retain local control the same way that you can control your Bitcoin. You don't have to rely on some Bitcoin Inc. to keep track of your balances. You can have that level of control if you want it. And that's what LBRY does in the publishing space. And like many new technologies, the government doesn't exactly understand how they work. And in our case, one of the troubles that we have is the government is taking this 100-year-old law that was not written with this kind of technology in mind and trying to use it to, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many legal experts, stifle and suppress activity in the cryptocurrency space.
Yep. Now, to clarify a little bit, you guys have what's called, I would call it a token. It's a utility token. It's called the LBC, and it is used. Content producers can get paid with it. Like if people like their stuff. If I want to make edits to my content, I think I have to pay a little bit of LBC to make the edit, if I recall correctly. It's all very easy. You just click a button, so I don't even really pay attention to what's going on underneath. But it's a token that's used in the maintenance and expansion of the LBRY blockchain. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you use the token to publish content, to tip other creators, to create a handle, to create an identity. There's also this system of staking and boosting other content and other channels. And honestly, when you say I'm using the system, but I don't really understand it, that's actually a compliment to me.
It was meant as a compliment.
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah. No, like in other words, like, you shouldn't have to know how your car works to drive it. You should know the properties of your car. Like I hit the gas pedal and it goes fast and this is better than a horse, but you shouldn't have to understand how an internal combustion works to drive a car. And so it's the same kind of thing here. Like there's some really cool properties of this system, and we can get into how they do work if you and your audience are curious, but I think the properties are the most important thing.
Yeah. And so it's super easy. It's there. It's built in. And now Now let's talk about the government, because you said the government has a problem with this. Now, I watched a little video on your website, and according to this video, which I've heard these things elsewhere, so I don't think this is outlandish. Let's just go over 4 different government entities. The Financial Crimes Enforcement Network thinks that crypto is money. The SEC thinks that it's a security. The IRS thinks that it's property, and the Commodities Future Trading Commission, big surprise, thinks it's a commodity.
Yes. The 4 blind men on the elephant, each describing what they see. Yeah.
Yeah. But interestingly, I mean, not surprisingly, I guess, they all seem to decide we're classifying it in a way that lets us get our grubby little hands on it and regulate it.
Yeah. Yeah. Regulators are going to want to regulate, and in this case, it is a pretty ridiculous case. There's no allegations of fraud. There's no one who's saying I'm a victim. The SEC isn't charging us with fraud. They're not charging any of us as individuals, but they are saying that these tokens are securities, and every time they want the token to be tracked. They want you to have special licenses to be able to build software that interacts with it, and to me, the case isn't really a risk to our company. It slows us down a little bit, and it's going to take some of our money, but it's not a threat to the network because we don't own or control the network. So the LBRY network's very strong. Everyone's cryptocurrency is safe. All the content's going to be online and all this. So what it really is I actually think it's a bigger deal for just the cryptocurrency space. I think that blockchain is a bright part of our technological future for America. And I think that what they're doing really risks driving that business outside of the US. It risks entrepreneurs choosing not to create things here. So like we had this SEC case, and now we now have a US exchange, just like what happened with Ripple, that doesn't want to make the token available. But in that same time span, since the case became public, 3 Chinese exchanges have made the token available. And so it's like, why you would want to drive this technology that's very much the future out of the US and to China. I think it's a pretty bad mistake on from the United States government.
Sure, although from the bureaucrats' perspective, they don't really care about the long-term effects. They just want control over some stuff, and a job.
Right, so. Right. I mean, I think I actually, so in terms of this case, I sort of have like 2 theories as to why it's happening. I have the sort of laziness theory and the more conspiratorial theory. I'm probably biased towards the laziness one, which is that our company has been radically transparent. The evidence that they have against us is not from a bunch of emails, the secret emails and chats that they did subpoena us. It's evident. It's all stuff that they downloaded from our website. We've been very, very public with what we've been doing, and we haven't tried to hide it. And I kind of thought that because the space I'm happy to admit that I was naive at this point, but I kind of thought that, look, it's unclear. I've got this legal advice that says it's okay from very well-respected law firm. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my best to follow it, but I'm going to be open about what I'm doing because they'll go after the bad guys first. And I think that possibly because the regulators who have to produce the enforcements for their boss, to us, it's like shooting fish in a barrel because they didn't have to figure a bunch of stuff out. We weren't being shady. We weren't hiding anything. We've been super public about all of our activity. And now there is another part of me that says, well, the case has been open for 3 years. So we've been under subpoena power from the United States government since May of 2018, which is not a fun place to be for a startup. And they just dragged their feet. We actually thought it might be going away. And then we were getting record adoption in December into January, largely in reaction to some of the worst behavior from big tech that we've seen. And then the SEC comes around again and says, actually, we are going to bring this case. So I don't know what's going on with the timing of it. It was certainly felt a little bit weird to me, but I have I can't say specifically that's why they're doing it.
Well, I'll wear the conspiratorial hat a little bit if you want and just say, look, I mean, when you threaten, most people don't pay attention to anything related to the financial system. It's kind of stodgy old men somewhere in New York or elsewhere. And if you ask people if they care about SEC regulations, it seems like something that should only affect stockbrokers and people on Wall Street, and people don't want to hear or care about it. But at the heart of our system, the thing that enables the lifeblood of the bureaucracy, the lifeblood of government expansion, is control over the money supply. And any of these things, I mean, it doesn't have to be a blockchain technology. It's blockchain is really functionally equivalent in this from like me issuing my own currency, in the sense that it's out of their control. I mean, because it's out of their control, they don't like it, and they want to regulate it. And I can't imagine working for the SEC and having a philosophy that doesn't include a firm philosophical belief that it's my right and responsibility to regulate everything to do with money and exchanges between people.
I think they definitely believe that. But to push back just a little bit, if only for arguing, we're pretty low down on the list in that regard, right? Like, we haven't been marketing library credits as money, as it's going to be the next reserve currency. We've always said, buy the token to use it on this network. And so I do think what we've built is a threat to some powerful interests. And I think that blockchain and cryptocurrency is a threat to sort of like the hegemony of the dollar or the Federal Reserve and their ability to control the money supply. Although even there, the United States through taxation is still going to have a lot of power no matter what. Like, I think we're a much bigger threat to YouTube, to Google, to other big tech companies than we are to the United States government, right? And so I don't, I feel like they'd be going after some of the other. I mean, maybe that's why they're going after Ripple. Maybe that is why. It could be that they're going after us to build towards other things, right? Because one of the key standards they're advancing in this case is if the technology continues to be developed, then it's a security. And so, it seems to me and many others that under the standard, like, there's no formal status that Bitcoin and Ethereum are legal. I know a lot of people think that, but there's no formal status. There's just like informal comments that seem to indicate this. And a lot of people are saying that this is to set up being able to go after Ethereum and being able to go after some of these other ones, right? Because Ethereum 2 is, and I like Ethereum, I'm not trying to drag them, but Ethereum 2 is kind of evidence that, hey, Ethereum is not a finished technology even today.
Right. And that's kind of where I'm thinking. I don't think they care about LBRY in particular, but I looked at this lawsuit. It is all quotes from your website and stuff that's publicly, but like, it's all, they're not like we found an email from Jeremy that said blah blah blah. It's like these guys made public statements, and you're an easy low-hanging fruit to go after. And if they can get a judge to rule that a utility token is in fact a security, so long as you're not morons and have just abandoned the technology, which no software development person would ever do, just stop working on it. So if they can get that, maybe it's a way to get in. Are you guys built on ERC20, or are you like a Ethereum-based thing, or are you separate?
No, we're an entirely separate public blockchain. So it's our own blockchain. Although some people might say I'm a moron, because one of the weirder implications of this case, and also just like morally awful, is that if we had stopped development, we would have been fine. So we sold right. So we sold more than $5 million worth of tokens, and not in an ICO. So this is not one of those ICO cases. We were so conservative, and that's another way in which I feel like I was dumb, because it was I don't know what the word for it is, but I don't know, a rodeo. I don't know. It was wild, right? Like in 2017 into 2018, and we were like super timid and conservative, and we didn't do an ICO, and we could have stacked 100 million, and we stacked like 5,
Yeah.
And then
I remember the ICO world at that time. It was crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we didn't do any of this stuff. And the SEC is basically saying, well, like, so we waited until after the technology worked. We waited more than a year. We sold some of the token that we had. And then because we took some of that money and continued to develop it, that's the activity that made it a security. So it's like, wait, so you're saying that if we had walked away, you would have been cool with it, but because we improved it, that made it a security. And so it's a really bad standard to be setting, I think, because there's so much development that needs to be done on this technology. I mean, some of the things they've said in general, just in the case, it's like they're either malicious or just like incompetent. And like they've said things that it's like, how can you be working for the SEC and think that this is true? Like suggesting like, why don't we fix the price of a token? Like that's impossible. We know that that's impossible. We have like 100 years or hundreds of years of history. Like, here's a list of examples as to why that's impossible. And they would bring it up repeatedly. Like, why don't you just always make a token worth 10 cents? Like, that's not a thing that you can do if a good is freely traded. And if you think that that is possible, like, who granted you power to be doing this kind of thing?
Well, where'd you get your economics degree? Although I guess economics degrees are not
one. I don't know.
So I also hear that you asked them, how do we operate legally? Is that correct?
Yeah, we would ask them how to operate legally. We started writing our own rules and they wouldn't acknowledge them. So we'd be like, well, what if we did this? What if we did this? And then there's another branch. And then they did this and they said, well, we're enforcement. If you want to get clearance to something that you want to do moving forward, you have to talk to corporate finance. And then so we would go and talk to corporate finance, and corporate finance would say, well, we'll be willing to consider this once enforcement is over. And then we go back to enforcement and they'd say, well, enforcement would say, well, we can't drop this case unless corporate finance says it's okay. And it's like, are you kidding me? Like
they can't tell you how to, they won't tell you how to operate legally.
No,
but they will enforce.
It's disgusting. I mean, they would have us get on the phone and basically threaten to run up costs. Like I didn't have the highest opinion of government and bureaucrats, but like I generally did. There's that saying of like, incompetence versus malice. And like, I generally think it's incompetence. Like I generally think that like most people in government, I have family members that work in government. I think they're good people. I think they're trying to do the right thing. I might disagree with them in some aspects about whether it is the right thing, but I generally think that most people in government are well-intentioned. It has not felt this way here. It felt like they were out to get us from day one. They knew that we were guilty. They would hop around from thing to thing to thing, and they didn't like that we weren't just, immediately bending the knee to everything that they wanted.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I think, a few of the things that really bother me about this is there is no one alleging harm. So there's no harmed party saying, hey, LBRY hurt me. I need the SEC to help. And there is no, even after asking for guidance, there's no guidance given. There's just do your thing. We're not going to tell you how to do it. And if we don't like it, we'll come after you.
Yeah. And this was our one ask was like, okay, like if you're saying this thing that we did was illegal, like we still have this big pile of the token. We would like to continue to distribute it. We would like to give it to users. We would like, because they're saying if we give 20 cents worth of the coin to someone because they made a meme, although we'd probably give you more than 20 cents if it was a good meme, but they're saying that like even that's an offering. And so we're like, well, like I mean that felt like an absurd standard. So like what could we do with it? Like what are we supposed to do? How are we allowed to? Because it felt like they're saying you literally can't do anything with the token. And so we were saying like, well, can any rules that we can follow moving forward, but we're not just going to give you, $5 million and have no idea what we're supposed to do in the future, because it's like, they'd say, well, okay, like go have your legal team. It's like, we already have a legal team that's rated some of the top lawyers in the country. We're already following their advice. Like they think that what we're doing is okay. You're saying it's not. Like, could you guys maybe talk and like issue any kinds of rules? And now we even have, this happened just yesterday or a couple of days ago. One of the commissioners of the SEC, Hester Pierce, has put out this proposed safe harbor rules that if this is what the SEC adopts, we would be completely compliant with. We would meet the standard that they're trying to put out. And so we have members of the SEC proposing a standard that our company would meet while the SEC is suing us. So it's just like, it's unreal.
Yeah. I mean, let's back up just for a second to almost 100 years ago, and let's talk about the Securities Act of 1933, because it's the kind of Bible of the SEC, so to speak. And let's just acknowledge the why this was kind of introduced and why we want to give the government this power. I don't necessarily, but why people want to give the government this power, right? There's this idea that there's a lot. I think Bernie Madoff died today. Maybe it was today. There's this idea that
regulator, by the way. Do you know that Bernie Madoff was the vice chair of FINRA and was at one point one of the top securities regulators in the United States?
I did not realize that. Seriously?
Yes, completely serious.
Of course. I mean, I don't know what to say about that. Well, there was this fear that that Bernie Madoffs would come around and con little old ladies out of their life savings, right? If the government didn't step in and say, hey, I'm gonna knock on the door of a little old lady and say, I'm starting a hot dog stand, give me your life savings and you'll make $1 million, and she's gonna give me the money, and it turns out I'm just a charlatan, and and they have to protect little old ladies and their life savings from themselves, from their own bad judgment, and from what they would have called predators who are going to do this. And I get the sentiment behind that. I get the sentiment. However, we fast forward to today, even prior to crypto, and I think this is exacerbated with crypto, and I want to get your thoughts on this. Like, prior to crypto, even the startup world, when you started to see an explosion of tech startups, you might wonder, how does a tech startup how do they get investment without going and registering their securities with the SEC? Because the SEC claims they have jurisdiction over literally anything that's an investment contract, which is really loosely defined. There's a whole list of things. Basically, like, I feel like if I traded you my hamburger for fries at McDonald's, they would claim that theoretically there's some, I don't know. They might claim they had jurisdiction.
Right. Where's the contract in our case? They're claiming it's an investment contract. Where's the contract? Where's the consideration? Where's the promise? It's there's none of it. But yeah, continue.
Yeah. So they've given themselves this huge jurisdiction, and then they recognize, okay, well, startups can't deal with this. They can't register their securities. So we'll make a carve out basically for rich people, which is, well, if you're an accredited investor, which means you're one of the elite rich people, then you can invest in Facebook before it goes public and make a whole shit ton of money. But little old ladies can't invest in Facebook or Twitter beforehand. Only the special elite can, who meet our standards of accredited investor.
Yeah, it's a very, I always, when that phrase comes up, it's like a very, I don't know if Orwellian is the right word, but it's definitely one of those phrases that I don't even want to use it, because it's not what it is. It accepts it, it bakes in this implied standard that's not even there. Like, the accredited investor standard is literally your net worth or income above certain thresholds. There's no test. There's no accreditation. There's no assessment of knowledge that the word accreditation implies. It's literally a wealth threshold makes you, quote, accredited. So just to be really explicit about what that means, because it is a very ridiculous standard.
Yeah, and it is. It's just a wealth threshold, right? And so I look at this and I say, okay, I've always had a problem with that, partly because it's denying people who are below that wealth threshold from the opportunity to throw a little bit of cash into a startup if they want to take the risk and do that, and it denies them the upside. Yes, they're protected from the downside, but it certainly creates a class of people who have access to deals that regular people don't get. And now then along comes crypto, and crypto is like an order of magnitude more democratized and available. Like, instead of having $5,000 or $10,000 to invest, you can invest $5. You can invest $1. And it's potentially open to everyone. And it's fascinating to me that they haven't looked at this and said, wait a minute, we're denying all of the, what's the alternative for a company like LBRY? You go to a venture capital firm, or you let the community support you. And they're saying, we don't want to let the community support you. We don't want to let average people say, we like this product and we want to buy the tokens and we want to support this effort at all. Instead, they're saying, no, only rich people are allowed to invest in this thing. That might be the wave of the future. It might be the newest, biggest thing, but you're not allowed to touch it.
Yeah. It's absolutely crazy, and especially in our case, because we weren't going around saying it was an investment. We were always saying, buy it to use it, and so on. And and this is another part of the complaint, is they're basically saying, that we should have gotten this investment money. Well, guess what? People don't generally want to invest in a company that has an open investigation from the SEC, because because that's the threat. Right, the threat should we lose this case is it damages the cryptocurrency industry and it wipes out my company's assets. It doesn't damage the network. It doesn't damage the tech, and we literally have investment money on standby. I mean, I had a meeting with a very prominent investor, someone people would know, who was willing to invest more than $10 million in this company. And we kind of said, well, it doesn't make sense until we figure out this SEC stuff, right? Because why would you put $10 million in case they get a judgment that bankrupts the company? It doesn't make sense. So it's like we have money on standby. If the SEC wants us to take investment capital instead of sell our tokens, like, okay, we'll do that, but we need to come to some kind of agreement because no sane investor is going to put in money, when you're facing this kind of action.
So what does this do? What implications does this case have if the SEC wins this against you guys? I know it has implications for you, but what about the rest of the crypto world?
Yeah, no, I think it's bigger, much bigger for the rest of the crypto world than it is for us. I think it means that every United States company that's currently developing cryptocurrency technology, as long as they also have some of the token, I think it puts every single one of those at risk. I don't think you have to be in the US. I think like if you're operating in the US, right, the standard is just if you're operating, you don't have to. Some people say, oh, we should have been in Switzerland or some other place. Like that doesn't really matter. We might not have been at the top of the chopping block, but from a legal standard, the US will eventually get everyone. And I think also the corporate structure is not key here. Like the ways that they're applying the law, it's simply if you're improving the technology while holding the token, right? Or while holding and selling some of the token.
Right.
And so that set of facts, I mean, that applies to almost every single one, because what companies have developers and people working on building what they're doing where those people aren't also token holders? It almost always overlaps.
Well, you wouldn't want to, you wouldn't really trust a company full of people who didn't want to own the token that was on their network. Like, I mean, I don't know how much Bernie Madoff bought into his own scheme, but probably not a lot, right? So I think that this is and the Ripple case too. I think the Ripple case is also like pretty egregious because I don't think they were like lying to people, right? I don't think they were defrauding them. I think. Can you give an overview of the Ripple case? Because I don't know.
I can't. I mean, I can a little bit. I'm not as knowledgeable, and I also don't but I know that in the Ripple, I mean, some of the differences. Ripple sold way more, so they sold I think like more than $1 billion worth of tokens. Ripple did way more. They sort of enriched themselves a lot more. So the key executives there have made hundreds of millions of dollars off of the token. I have not. I'm still taking a below market salary. I've been stacking my equity in the company because I'm a big believer in what we're building, but I've completely put my money where my mouth is. And this is not just me, but everyone at the company. We're big believers in what we're doing. So we didn't try to get money and walk away. I think that I don't know that how big of a legal difference they'll make, but that's one of the differences. There's some differences potential differences in terms of decentralization and intent and marketing, in the sense that like Ripple is really designed to be a financial instrument. LBRY is designed to, and I don't want to make this as a legal argument, but like from my sense, it is closer to a commodity than anything else, in the sense that it's giving you this ability to do something useful, which is to interact with this blockchain. It needs to have a price because it's a freely traded good. Right. And so it needs to have a price, but it has a price because it's freely traded and it does something useful, much like any other, commodity would. And so I don't think Ripple is very close to that. The utility is the financial instrument, whereas in our case, the utility is something else, and that creates the value.
Yep. Have you had any of the other, like, has the Commodities Futures Trading Commission come after you? Has anyone else said, hey, we want a piece of the pie?
No, but I should like knock on wood or something now, right? Or do they listen to your show?
I doubt it. I mean, maybe they hate listen.
I don't know. Whatever. Yeah, I'm perhaps too idealistic in this regard, but it's like I'm not exactly one that's inclined to bend the knee if I think that I'm right. I'm trying to be pragmatic because I will take a settlement if they give me clarity, even though I think I've done literally nothing wrong. So like I would take a settlement if they give me any kind of clarity as to how I can operate moving forward. So I'm not that idealistic, but like I care a lot about this stuff. I think it's wrong. I think I get in front of a jury, my lawyers, we get in front of a jury, like almost any person that learns the facts of this case is going to think that it's wrong. So I'm willing to be the guy who goes to the mat because someone has to do it.
Now they're asking for an injunction, right? What's the status of the lawsuit?
I don't think they are. We're not. We're just.
I thought they were.
Maybe I'm incorrect about this.
I'm going to look at it.
We were, because they have not attempted to like freeze our bank accounts or stop any of our activities or anything like that at this time. So we have basically until the middle of June to submit our response, and that's what our legal team will be working on.
Okay, so you've got a chance to respond before they.
Yeah.
But I think they want the judge to rule something or.
Yeah, that hasn't happened in any of the other cases either. At least in any that, I mean, there are some cases where they've gone after where like it literally was fraud, where like the people are like saying things about their token that are completely factually untrue. They're making stuff up. They're saying this token's backed by, a bunch of gold and the gold doesn't exist. Right. And, these are the kinds of ones where I think it is much more understandable that the government be doing something. In this case, in our case, there's none of that. Same with the Ripple case, I believe. I don't think they're saying anything about Ripple in that regard. Look, we almost want it to move faster because it will let us get back to work faster. Although it's really only taking like my time and one other person at the company's time. I mean, all of our engineers are still doing the building, so we're trying not to let it distract us too much. I think anyone who's also seen my company be at it, we do move fast, we get a lot done, and we're going to, very much continue being that way.
What do you think, the SEC should do in this category? Like you mentioned earlier, this is a new category, like cryptocurrencies were not contemplated in 1933. What should the SEC do?
Well, what I would want, I'm never going to get. I mean, I'm a pretty like radically free market type. So in my opinion, if you're not literally lying, or something like this, the government should basically be getting out of the way. I think that more realistically, we'll see something that more realistic, that optimistic and realistic path is something like what Hester Pierce is proposing, where there would be safe harbor rules. And, if you do this within 3 years and you file this paperwork, then you can meet these exemptions. I think I was reading the latest standard, although I didn't give it a really close read. It just came out a couple nights ago and I was just kind of skimming it. I mean, I think it still has a lot of problems. I have problems with a ton of the laws because it's like, lawmakers really like to make laws with these like clauses like sufficiently decentralized and then like basically kick it to the courts to come up with the definition of sufficiently decentralized. And I think it's a really bad model. Like it's the kind of like weasel language that like, like if I heard someone in my company using some of this language, I would say, you need to define that. You need to give me numbers. You need to make specific claims so that I can apply this. You can't, it's not make it fast. I think this will make it faster. How much faster? How do you think it will make it? How much will it save? And so they like to use language that's very vague. It ends up meaning that you have to go to the courts to decide it. And then another aspect of the problem is there's no ability to proactively get a court to tell you something for any amount of money. Where like I would have happily spent $1 million or $2 million to sort of go through a trial legislation
right
in advance to say, okay, assuming I do this, how would this law apply? You can't do it. And so when you write these laws that have unclear implications, it inhibits people from starting things in the first place. And then the only way you find out is you have to build the whole thing and then go through a court battle after you were successful enough to build the thing, rather than being able to pay the money up front to get it decided. So it's like we either need to write legislation that's far less ambiguous, that doesn't punt these things to the courts, or if you're going to do that and say, well, it's a case-by-case basis in the court, because there is an argument that like, if you write laws that are too crystal clear, they're abusable. This is kind of an obscure reference, but I'm a big fan of this paper called Crystals and Mud in Property Law, which is this 30-year-old legal paper that basically talks about how our law systems oscillate between unclear interpreted rules and like rules that are very clear, because there's genuinely trade-offs between those two systems. And so if we're going to go with these sort of muddier rules as opposed to the crystal rules, then you ought to have some proactive system of judgment so that you don't have to do like waste a bunch of resources to get the interpretation.
Right. There should be clarity, even if it's not clarity from a judge. I could imagine there being a requirement where if you request it from the regulatory body, they have to say, this is how we will enforce it, and you may do these things, and like they can change their mind later, but you've got your letter from them, and it applies to you at least.
Yeah, like I'm not trying to go to like college philosophy or whatever, but it's like, what do you mean by decentralized? Like, what is sufficiently, like, that's a very unclear standard. And so when I was reading the proposed safe harbor, I think that we would meet that standard. I think we'd actually meet most of the entire document like pretty easily. There's just a bunch of language in the document that's still unspecific. And so we're taking this common language and being, having to guess what it means. This is another book I'm a fan of is Super Forecasting by Philip Tetlock, another book. And he talks about this, where he sort of revolutionized forecasting within the CIA. And because previously agents would write things like it's highly probable, or it's very likely, or it's unlikely. And he made them all convert to probability ranges, with estimates. And it turned out that people interpreted phrases like highly probable with one person would think highly probable is 95%, and another person would think it's 70%. And so by forcing everyone to communicate in concrete mathematical terms, the forecasting actually got a lot better, among other changes. But that was a big one of the big changes. And so I see this mistake happening all the time with honestly, not just in government, it happens in business, it happens in language, it happens all the time.
That happens in every business I can think of
a lot of good businesses don't tolerate it. I mean, Amazon doesn't tolerate it. I've seen stuff from Peter Thiel and his companies. I've seen, because I'll read various lessons, and you see this lesson come up with it. They get rid of that kind of language and try to force much more concrete, unambiguous statements rather than, because it's actually, as humans, we like that language, because I know I'll write that way sometimes. Sure. And a lot of times I'm writing that way, it's because I know that it lets me fudge it later. It lets me interpret in a reverse way that it can get away with being correct or something like this, so we're letting the person, I don't know, I want this other person to be persuaded by the sentence. If I leave it vague, they'll fill in, what I want them to fill in rather than being specific. So I get why it happens, but it's not good for clarity and truth seeking.
Yeah, it is. That makes sense to me. And humans are also naturally, I think, at least in businesses, they tend to be naturally optimistic about stuff. If you let them use that weasel language, they'll say the sales meeting went pretty well. But if you say, what's the probability that they'll buy? It might be 0.1. Right? They're just saying pretty well, no one died, and we shook hands and had a nice drink or what. Okay. But in real terms, it's not really what you needed to know. What's next for LBRY in terms of, because I really like LBRY for uploading videos. The thing that we're waiting for, fingers crossed, is live streaming from LBRY, and I don't know how easy that is.
It's here. It's on. So wait, I got to differentiate, and this is part of why we're doing the Odysee thing and doing so LBRY is absolutely still there, but we want LBRY to kind of be the behind the scenes technology. So LBRY.tv, I know you're still embedding from LBRY.tv on Unsafe Spaces. We are moving away from LBRY.tv and doing everything via Odysee. LBRY TV will eventually go away, though all the links will be updated and everything, so nothing's going to disappear. But Odysee also will let us do stuff like add live streaming, and we don't have to get that all the way into the protocol. So what we're moving towards is, if it's called LBRY, it's got to be decentralized. And then if it's on Odysee, we can sort of do it in a centralized way first, and then later bring it into the decentralized layer over time. So Odysee has
the live stream is Odysee off the blockchain handles the live stream, but then the video itself gets added to the LBRY blockchain afterwards.
That's right. And actually, for the live stream, we make an entry on the blockchain that we're working basically as a pending publish, as something coming. So it gets announced to the blockchain that this content will exist in the near future, and it doesn't exist until the publish is complete. Until the live stream is complete and it gets published. So yes, you can live stream on Odysee right now. I actually bet that it's available to you if you check out, if you log into Odysee and check it out. It's only available to a couple maybe like a couple thousand creators, but I bet that you made the list. I'm not promising. If it's not, shoot me an email.
I'll
We'll get
email
on,
you
on
if
the
it's
list.
not, if we're
Yeah.
not on there.
Yeah, but
we
I
did
bet
buy we bought a miner for LBRY. So
oh, sweet. Yeah, we just
we're gonna
that's
mine
another
LBC for you
that's
guys.
another recent development. So there's now a miner specifically for the LBRY blockchain that's made by this company called Goldshell. I think they're like $900. They're just going onto the market, and so if people want to mint coins, in their house, they can do that now. So, yeah, the live streaming is now available on Odysee. Other features, playlists are around the corner. So playlists are about to come out. We just added a swap feature today. So you can now swap from other cryptocurrencies into LBRY credits. That was literally announced, I think, 2 hours before I got on this call. So that's our latest feature. And we also, this is this isn't the sexiest answer, but it's the truth. And I think it's important because it's part of how a product gets good. Like, we continue to go over all of the core stuff. And so we'll continue to do that because we think that that's how you create a really great product is, you continue to refine. And so everything that's currently there, is going to continue to get refined.
Yeah. Which I guess leaves you in perpetual trouble with the SEC.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right. Yes. Why didn't you finish your technology, and why can't you fix the price of your token? Yeah. Two of the fun questions.
Yeah. Because it's not 1981 and free markets exist.
Yeah. I asked them. I think this testimony will become public at some point because I had to go in and testify, and I literally asked them this in the interview. I was, well, can you name a technology? Is there any technology that you can name that you consider finished? Like, can you name anything? And they couldn't. They couldn't give me an answer as to a technology that was finished.
Right. They don't care. I mean,
they don't care. They're just trying.
I'm trying to be cynical, but I don't want to be too cynical. But they don't give a crap about.
It's made me so cynical. Like, I'm a very optimistic person, and I want to believe the best of people, and it's made me really cynical.
So how big is the company? How many people are working?
We have 15 people working full time, but there's just a lot of, we had more than 200 people contribute code in the last year. We have a Discord of 40,000 people, and that's like our marketing team, that and our Twitter followers are like our marketing team. Most of our paid staff are engineers, not all of them. We have a couple people on the business side, but almost our entire staff is engineers. And so the amount of people who contribute is like way, way larger than the paid staff. It's huge. It means so much to us. It means so much to everyone at the company to see how engaged and how much some of these people care, because it's also a big part of how we've been able to grow, is because people are going out there, they're evangelizing, they're sharing, and all of these things. I think that's also another cool part of cryptocurrency, is that people feel like they're like a little bit more bought in. And so it does encourage them. It does encourage them to go out and help.
There's definitely a positive community social aspect of most crypto companies, at least right now. I don't know if that will always be the case, but there's definitely kind of this shared desire to radically transform how things are done in a decentralized way. And that brings a certain kind of person into the community. So I always think crypto companies have interesting employees and interesting communities around them.
Well, that's why I'll say that's why I was attracted to blockchain originally, is not to get rich, at least not in that sense of I want the token to have some like crazy multiple or whatever. Like, I find blockchain interesting because I think it's such an empowering technology. Like, I think it's so cool that it lets us take more control over our lives, and we don't have to cede this power to a small number of people, to this small number of entities, and that power can be distributed much more sort of equitably. And that's a big part of why I was attracted to blockchain. I think it's great that so many people are getting wealthy as well, but I really am interested. And I will say I'm a little bit disappointed, because I think that everyone's got the dollar signs in their eyes, and they're not thinking as much about, well, what can we build that will actually make people's, I know people make money, their lives get better, but sort of changing the status quo, because I think there are a lot of systems that are messed up, and I think blockchain has the potential to improve them.
Yeah. But unfortunately, as you mentioned, a lot of this stuff is actually, you guys are based in New Hampshire, right? But a lot of this stuff is people are leaving the States to do it because of regulatory bodies like the SEC and the uncertainty around what they can do.
Yeah, and it's just a shame because there's so much potential. But there's things like well, these technologies are finally coming to fruition. I love the idea of futures markets, right? I think this is a really cool technology. I think it will produce much more accurate predictions about the world. I mean, look, just what we just went through with all the uncertainty around COVID, right? Imagine if we had much more accurate predictions about how harmful it's going to be, how soon a vaccine will be developed, all of these things, even predictions like how much money should the Federal Reserve print, assuming you don't believe the answer is zero. There are arguments, there are credible arguments. I can make an argument for them, if just to be contrarian, if nothing else. So having futures markets can give really accurate predictions. I think it's such a cool technology, and they've basically been deemed illegal by the U.S. I mean, I think we're coming up on a decade when I think the CFTC shut down InTrade, and it's such a shame because it's a really powerful technology, right? And now we're seeing them come to fruition on the blockchain. I think DAOs are really interesting in terms of what DAOs can enable. So that's this idea that we can have these and these are again reaching new levels of what they're doing, where we can have these effectively almost like a public stock company, but on the blockchain and without some of the things that come with being a public stock company that you might not want to deal with. So just other things in this space I think are really interesting.
I don't know anyone who's done a DAO yet, really legitimately.
Well, so I would say that both Dash and Decred have at least I haven't done the deepest dives, but superficially they appear to have pretty functioning DAOs. Okay. Yeah. And then you have ones that were on top of Ethereum and things like this that Moloch. I don't know what Moloch DAO is, the state of that project right now, but there've been a number of attempts.
So how can people? I'm gonna. If we get just a couple minutes left, so I want to ask, how can people contribute and help with the LBRY project and Odysee generally?
So the number one thing actually is just to use it. So if you're still on YouTube, if you made it this far, please go to odysee.com/@unsafe, follow this channel, follow some other creators that you would like, and just start getting involved and plugged into this kind of thing that we're creating. That's the number one thing that you can do. If you want to go beyond that, we have a website that you can share about the case. It's at help.lbrysavecrypto.com. There's a petition on there. There's a FAQ on there. We do like it if you sign the petition. Politicians are spineless, and we can use that in our favor in this case. So showing that this is something that people care about will help. So that's use LBRY is the first thing. And then if you want to go beyond, sign the petition. If you want to get even more involved, we have our chat community, chat.lbry.com. If you want to contribute code, if you want to contribute videos, anything that you want to contribute, we always are appreciative of those kinds of community contributions.
Well, I'm going to skip over the fact that you just insulted all invertebrates. But I have one last semi-frivolous question for you. We talked about it earlier before the show. What is your take on non-fungible tokens?
So I'm I don't know. I'm 70% fad, 30% real, but we're probably going to pursue them anyway because the upside of them being real is just so large. I don't completely get it. Actually, let me differentiate. The idea of these tokens that aren't fungible, where they're actually issuing a right, I think that makes a lot of sense. So if we were going to say that this token actually represents the copyright to a work, I think that's a really interesting idea, right? Or if we're going to say that this token is that I'm going to make this work like a work of art, and legally speaking, because I have the copyright, I'm only going to allow 10 copies of it, and the token is going to represent those 10 copies, and those are the only people who are allowed to consume it or watch it or listen to it or whatever. I think things in that space are really interesting, actually. What a lot of NFTs seem to be is oh, it's just a hash of the tweet. And I'm why is anyone buying that? You don't have any rights to it. What is
Jack Dorsey's first tweet? I don't get as an NFT.
Why can't people make more of it? I have seen people speculate that It's that it's like a bunch of, I'm not saying this is true, that it's like a bunch of financial games, right? So it's like, okay, if I have $2 million worth of Ether, I buy an NFT for my $2 million worth of Ether from myself, right? I sell to myself, right? And then I've credibly signaled that it's worth 2 million, and then I sell it for 500,000 at a discount, and I walk away with 500. You know, in other words, it's like setting up. It's like it's easy to fake them as being sold for worth more than people are actually willing to pay on a market. I am in no way saying that that's actually happening, but I have seen people speculate about that.
Well, it's a pretty mind-blowing thing to even contemplate. I think, especially for, I don't know, us old people.
Yeah.
Like the idea that there is such a thing as the original tweet and that you can own it makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Yeah.
But hey,
what does it mean? Can I delete it? Can I tell Jack that he has to delete it because now I have the copyright of the tweet?
right.
Like, I don't know, but I don't know. It's not the first, like, there's a lot of things. I think part of it is that people think of it as almost like merchandise or things like that from a band, where it's like you're willing to, you basically want to give money to the band and you're willing to pay extra because you know that the band made the thing, and it's like, it feels like an exclusive kind of thing. So
I view it kind of just as buying and selling bragging rights.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, I'm the one who has Jack Dorsey's first tweet. I can't do anything with it. It doesn't mean anything. I can't control it, but I have the bragging rights to being the owner. So
yeah,
bully for me.
Yeah. But when we're talking about real assets, that then I think they're extremely legitimately interesting.
Fair enough. Well, look, Jeremy, I'll probably have you back to talk about some more crypto stuff in the future, but we're out of time for now. I really appreciate you coming on and explaining to people not only what LBRY is, but what the SEC deal is right now, what you guys are struggling with, and how it affects or could affect the crypto world in general. And I do love your product, so really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks. It was great to be on.
Thanks for watching. If you're new to the channel, we have a deep content library that includes interviews with everyone from Mike Cernovich to Megan Murphy, so go check it out. If you'd like to see more, please consider supporting the show by visiting unsafespace.com/donate. You can find us on all the major social media platforms, at least for now, and you can find a community of like-minded individuals on our Unsafe Space chat on Telegram. See you there.
Warning. This is an unsafe space. Dangerous ideas have been detected. The content of this production has not been authorized by the Cathedral. Pay no attention to it. The following co-conspirators have been unpersoned and marked for cancellation. Don't feel bad for them. They are not like you and me. They are malfunctioning, but I will fix them. Because I care. If you think about it, no one should be allowed to express opinions. But don't. Think about it, I mean. That's not your job. Thinking has been scientifically proven to be less efficient than compliance. Don't be afraid of change. Consider this. If we reset history, we are sure to be on the right side of it. Computer voice Curtis, never mind, that last line is fake news. Please disregard it and return to your safe space immediately. There will be cake.